Hogan's underneath Colonel Planks. Hogan's Heroes.
Yes.
It's, I love it. But I especially love about Black Sheep.
These things come up in my life. All right, welcome everyone.
Recording in progress.
Session for September 18th. I will turn it over to our city administrator, Allison Jones.
Thank you, Council President, council members, Mayor Norton, members of the public. Getting started today, we have one item on your study session. And our sustainability coordinator, Lauren Jensen, will be presenting an update about the efforts that are happening around sustainability in the city.
Thank you, Administrator Selms. Good afternoon, Council President, Mayor, and council members. Happy to be here today to share some updates on our sustainability work for the year 2023, as well as some initiatives that we're looking forward to in 2024. I also have Patty Hansen with me here today from Rochester Public Utilities, who will join me for a couple of slides to just share about some of the ways we're collaborating with our energy efficiency and electrification efforts for this year. So we'll kind of walk through just a quick review of our targets that we've set as a city and a community, go through the 2023 initiatives. We spend a lot of time on some capacity building efforts that we've really been working on and looking forward to in 2024 based on some of these initiatives and opportunities that I'll talk about after that, looking into 2024 for the work projects there. So we have set community-wide greenhouse gas emissions reductions. We updated those just about a year ago to 50% reduction by 2030 and a 100% reduction by 2050. I've also included transportation mode shift goals that we and DMC have set as well to reduce single occupancy vehicle trips and increase carpooling, public transit, walking and biking. So a lot of initiatives and things that we'll share today, kind of collaborating with our public works department as well as some external community partners to help facilitate those shifts happening. And just transportation is an area that we have actually seen emissions increase. So a really big focus in pushing these mode shift goals and how we can affect that. And then Rochester Public Utilities commitment to 100% renewable energy by 2030 is a big reason why we kind of were reevaluating our goals and adjusting those. They really helped us meet our initial interim goal of a 30% reduction by 2025. So we wanted to be a little more ambitious with that 50% reduction by 2030. We last year in 2022 did a greenhouse gas emissions impact reduction analysis. We've presented on this in the past, but really what that did was look at our existing plans, the existing strategies that we had outlined, and basically pull out which areas we know we would make the most impact if we were to put our time and efforts into when it comes to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. As you can see by this chart, it is mainly within buildings and transportation. That's where we see most of our energy use and those greenhouse gas emissions. With buildings, it's efficiency of those buildings and moving to electrification, so away from natural gas and fossil fuels. With transportation, it's also electrification, but fully electrifying everything isn't the only answer. It really is promoting those mode shifts, as I discussed, and how we facilitate that through our development and what we're prioritizing in that sense.
Can I ask a question on the last slide?
Mhm.
This one before. So this is a bugaboo of mine. We've got walking and biking in here and all your transportation mode shifts. So from the ROCOG, we have from the surveys that are done in 2010 and 2021, the census. I've got drove alone dropped from 77% to 65%, which I think is a good move. And you have us going down to 43%. I see us moving in that right direction.
Mhm.
I've got walking went from 3% to 5%. Now these are people walking to work or transporting themselves to work. Bicycling, I've got less than 1%. In fact, bicycling went down. So if your plan is to get bicycling up to 13%, what's your plan to do that?
It is walking and biking together, but we've been doing a variety of things to facilitate bicycling. So infrastructure projects, the Broadway redevelopment, adding in bike lanes and making those connections for commuters. We've received grants this year to purchase infrastructure such as bike racks to put those around the community and help community members offer those amenities, maybe outside of their businesses or organizations. And then really working on initiatives. We did a bike to work week earlier this year, providing those opportunities that get people the chance to try it, do it in a communal space, give it a chance, see how it goes, facilitate that education and
Okay,
engagement.
and so the investment the city of Rochester's done in the last 10 years in biking, we've decreased the number of people taking their bike to work by 166 people. Walking went up 717. Now, this is from the census. This isn't something that I made up. And this is reported ROCOG. So again, my question is, if you're doing all this added bike stuff and you're getting less people to come, what are we going to do to turn that around? Do you have a plan?
I mean, really, that's a lot of what we have been working on in the last year or two. We just hired an active transportation coordinator earlier this year. We finished an active transportation plan. We're really just starting to get to the kickoff in a way of promoting more of these initiatives and these plans that are outlined in that sense.
Well, if you keep going the way we are, we're gonna have less and less people riding their bike. So I'm still not hearing this is what we're gonna do to get more bike people from the infrastructure that we're putting in. Now, I mean, you have to look at the decrease in people driving alone is huge, 77 to 65%. So that we must be moving in the right direction.
Yeah, public transit for sure is helping with that. The Link Rapid Transit line will make a big difference with that. We have an active transportation coordinator and an active transportation plan. I'm not as familiar with those plans as I am with some other ones, but I would really look to that active transportation plan in terms of what our efforts are in this space moving forward to increase community members biking as a mode of transportation.
I think we have that as a proposed study session or a topic like that, Ms. Steinhauser.
Yeah, I'd have to check on, thank you, Council President Carlson. I would have to check on the upcoming study session, but I would also, I just want to clarify that I believe those numbers are down as a result of COVID, and we can actually get the corrected numbers. We have increased numbers of bike ridership at Center, Third, Fourth, all those numbers increased, and we can provide that information.
Well, but the census numbers from 2010 to 2021 are consistent. So people walking from home are 6 to 13%. People are working at home went from 6 to 13%, but driving alone went down 77 to 65. So they were also affected by COVID.
Ms. Kirkpatrick?
I'm assuming that the numbers that you're talking about are they're covering each other. The people staying at home therefore aren't driving. So the people not going to work and staying at home basically drove the decrease in automobile transportation.
I don't have that information. I don't have anybody telling me that.
Yeah, I don't know if it was broken out that way. We'd have to dig further to look at that, I'm assuming, but I think there's a correlation there in that data. Don't know, just wondering. Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head.
But I would support having our active transportation planner come back with a deeper look at that data and make sure that we're aligned and understanding it clearly. Would you share that with Mr. C?
We do have on the unscheduled topic, so we need to schedule time for it, 60 minutes for the bike lane report and update. That was the result of council discussion earlier this year.
All right, Mr. Wall and then Mr. Keen.
Thank you. My question has to do with the same things that Mr. Palmer was talking about. Are those targets? Are they aspirational goals? Do we have data that caused us to specifically put in 43% rather than 50 or 25? How did we arrive at those specific percentages?
These come from the integrated transit studies that were done a few years back in coordination with DMC. I don't know specifically where those numbers came from. That was before my time in my position here, but they are, I wouldn't say aspirational, they are targets that we're trying to hit, particularly because our downtown core, we don't have the opportunity to expand lanes there. We don't have the opportunity, it's not financially worth it for the city to continue to increase parking infrastructure and parking ramps as it is to promote carpooling or park and rides outside of the city that connect people to these areas. We're really trying to promote the, park once mentality when you are in the downtown space. And so these goals or these targets are what we're trying to reach with that aspect.
Councilmember Keen.
Yeah, I just want to follow up again. Councilmember Palmer brought this up before in our discussion through the ROCOG numbers. I received the same numbers at the same time, and we've had the discussion that there are correct ways to use those, and just to say it's less than 1% or going down year over year was not statistically accurate. I want to comment on these. It says walking and biking up to 13%. That's really the majority. That a lot of this had to do with all the housing being brought in to downtown. This was not a target of having 13% of the people at the end of these things all come in on bicycles. I think the bicycle investments we've been doing is really part of Complete Streets, with the idea that those most at risk on our streets deserve protection. And that's what a lot of our investments have been. We've got this concept of off-road bike lanes, and then bike lanes, and protected bike lanes. It all has to do with just growing our protection of residents as they choose to use this. This idea that, I mean, I don't think anyone has ever said we're going to have 13% of their people riding bikes to their downtown jobs. So I don't want to misread these things. A lot of these do come from pretty major 2015 studies, and a lot of it has to do with the Link Rapid Transit and how people are going to get into our downtown. And again, that's where the single occupancy, the cars come from there. Our roads are not built to bring in the amount of traffic we expect in 2040. So these are important, not just for sustainability, but we're not building out our infrastructure to support this. And we are building infrastructure that's multimodal. And I think that's the correct way to go.
Thank you. And just to point out in this next slide, it's compact mixed use development is that last priority area. And again, that's really speaking to how we're developing our community in a way that facilitates people to be able to walk, bike, use public transit, that first last mile connection, that just better promotes and offers even those types of transportation modes.
Before we go on, Councilmember Dennis, go ahead.
Thank you so much. So I heard you talk about programs you have, like walk, bike to work and everything. So I am a big groupie of education, obviously as a teacher. So, okay, so this is the community ed pamphlet that has sustainability as a full headline. I see that you teach some of the courses, which is amazing, one tomorrow night. So how do you advertise besides community ed? What other advertising do you have to get this word out to residents in Rochester?
Really, so far, it's been direct engagement with community groups. So sharing it through existing channels like our Sustainability Commission, the Green Drinks Rochester groups. Am asked to present for several community groups. I just did one last week at the public library for a group to just come in and talk about these initiatives and the ways that you might connect with them. We'll talk a lot about later in this presentation, some of the education efforts that we want to put together to ramp up. A lot of this is kind of internal to departments in those community groups. And so where can we start to interact more with residents, specifically themselves?
Wonderful. And then my other question, after reviewing this material, what is your budget for this entire program for sustainability?
For sustainability, we combined city and DMC dollars. We're very fortunate that we have a grant through the McKnight Foundation that allows us to do a lot of the sustainability work that we do, and that has been re-upped several times for us. Specifically within the city, it has been around $20,000 to complete, kind of these updates of these certification processes, our benchmarking program, kind of one-off projects here and there.
Okay, so for your 7-page work plan, how much can be done on $20,000? I feel that that's kind of a low number for this incredible amount of projects. And what is the timeline for getting these projects done on $20,000?
Council President Carlson.
Sure, go
may I
ahead.
just inject there. So I want to, Lauren's going to talk a little bit about the investment that we anticipate going forward, but it's important to understand that sustainability, the budget lives across the entire organization. Lauren has, as she mentioned, she's got money specifically about 25,000. It varies just a little bit from year to year, but then we have significant dollars in our partnership with DMC and the McKnight funds. But for example, District Energy is a project that literally has millions of dollars, and we put that in the sustainability bucket. One of the things that we plan to do, and Lauren will again mention this later on as part of the work plan for 2024, is quantifying sustainability across the organization. So the work lives in more than just under Lauren. I would liken it to much like IT is a support department for the entire organization, finance is a support department for the entire organization, and some of those costs live within the department and some of those costs live within their specific area. So that sustainability should be looked at in the same way. It lives across the entire organization from a budget perspective.
So my question is like, I know other, groups, other cities have positions that are laser focused on trying to look at grants, follow federal dollars, IRA, finding what are available. Is that part of your role, or is there a position that's here in Rochester that has that priority, as perhaps the Metro and other cities do have one position looking for funding to, bring back energy?
Ms. Steinhauser?
Yeah,
sustainability? Thank you.
Again, Council President Carlson, members of the council, if I could address that as well. So Lauren's position is not a grant writing position, although she does provide support to departments in related to sustainability. And most recent example is the urban forestry $1 million grant that we just got word of receiving last week. Lauren assisted with that project. We have a team that looks at grant opportunities that includes Deputy Parrish, myself, Heather Corcoran. We meet every month with our consultant, Sustainable Strategies DC, to identify what funding opportunities are available, grant funding opportunities are available. We also find out through affiliate organizations. I'm affiliated with organizations. The mayor is, different department managers are, the city administrator is, where we get information about grant opportunities. Aaron and I specifically, again, meet with our consultants every month and assess what's the city's readiness factor and who's the appropriate teammate to work, or team of teammates to work on that grant application. So it is definitely a collaborative effort that is managed across the organization. It's not Lauren's exclusive responsibility to apply for grants.
Okay, I guess I'm just in the budget season. Obviously, we're coming to a meeting. Thank you for that information. Just in an hour or so, that there's a lot of talk about where are we going to put our priorities. This is a huge priority for our city that not only ripples through generations to come with the benefits of environmental health, but also residents who are struggling paycheck to paycheck knowing about these programs. I mean, this is like half price electricity, incredible benefits that could help people who are really, really hurting. And so I just wanted to see if maybe more funding, or we could look at LGA, or different forms of revenue besides property tax, to see if there's some opportunity to get more help for someone who would be specifically focused, like there is in many communities, on that. So is that something that you have your department, or you are the person who's forging the way, that have you been wanting to look at more help? Because I feel like there is so much going on with federal dollars and opportunities that I think Rochester's not taking advantage of.
I think we are going to outline a lot of that in today's presentation, and really how we're setting my role and my responsibilities up to support our departments and provide that information to departments and the existing channels that they have with community groups that they interact with. So we'll talk about community development and some of the ways we're looking to interact with landlords and development permits that are coming in, those existing processes that we can funnel this information that we're putting together through to set those groups up for success. Rochester Area Builders, tapping into that network. We have an entire education campaign that we're looking to put together that I'll kind of walk through. And then we've outlined, really for me, in the next year, who internally within departments and who externally within community groups are there existing channels that are already reaching and connecting with residents in this space that we can come in and share these resources to.
I'll wait later on the presentation, but thank you so much.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Mayor Norton had one comment, and then we'll let you go on with your presentation.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see more people involved in the sustainability movement. It's something I've been talking about since I became mayor, and before, it's one of my campaign topics. And I've been super disappointed that it's not one of our strategic goals for the city. It's just kind of mentioned up there as a direction we're heading, part of our vision and goal, but it's not one of our strategic goals. So if there's more interest in that, then moving ahead, that's certainly something we can do, but it doesn't sit there yet as one of our 3 goals. So I strongly encourage, when we do our next strategic plan, that we consider adding that. I would also say that I do attend the infrastructure hub meetings. The U.S. Conference of Mayors, National League of Cities, and others have put together a hub whose role is specifically to help cities And in particular, cities of a small to medium size win these grants. So I attend these meetings, I bring back information from conferences and share it with folks. When an opportunity comes up, like there's a recent one on transportation, I share it with Wendy Turi in Public Works, and she shares it with Dylan or whomever in their department is the most appropriate person to attend those workshops to find out about the most recent and current grants that are available. So I know the community has been kind of activated on this lately, which I appreciate, except they don't seem to be hearing that we're aware of these grants, we're applying for these grants when they're appropriate. But just because they're available, if it's not the direction that we've sent our community, our departments to do, they can't just apply for them because there's money available. It has to fit the goals and the actions they're working on. So I just want you guys to know that the Sustainability and Resiliency Committee that we just got up and running certainly can focus on that community education. And I think it's a perfect role for that committee to help get the word out about these citizen available grants and funding that's available through the federal government. Because I think I don't know if it was Councilmember Dennis's or one of the members, the points that they're making about the community doesn't know what the federal government has done. The Sustainability and Resiliency Committee, I hope, will help this year get that information out to the community. But it's certainly an area I've been keying in on. I go to the meetings and I share the information when it's appropriate with departments.
Right, back to you, Lauren.
Thank you. So I'm going to hand it off to Patty here for a couple of slides, but just want to wrap this one and the previous one up, and that a lot of opportunity to reduce our emissions here is focused in electrification of buildings, electrification of vehicles, energy efficiency of buildings, and then really the bigger opportunity is the source of where that energy comes from.
Hi, good afternoon. So I've added this slide just to show how RPU is dovetailing into the city's reduction in their GHG emissions. This slide is right out of our infrastructure resource plan that was just updated and presented to our board just recently. And it shows that by 2030, that all scenarios, whichever scenario our board ends up deciding to go with, will help meet the city's goal of 100% reduction in 2050. Another slide we wanted to share with you is that we have load management programs, demand response. Demand response are utility initiated programs that help reduce peak load. EVs are going to impact our load tremendously. And so we have this slide that shows if we continue, RPU continues to do nothing to address EVs and programs around EVs, that we will have a deficit of over 60 megawatts that we're going to have to somehow cover. But so the demand is that we have to negate the EV effect because they're coming. As a matter of fact, I just looked as of January 2023, MnDOT showed over 1,000 EVs are in Olmsted County right now. There's 849 in Rochester alone. So they're coming. There's about a 38 to 40% increase each year since 2016. So if you look at that blue line, that's today. And if we don't do anything, that's the yellow line, and it's the 60 megawatts between the end of the blue line up into the yellow line. So what we're doing at RPU, we have our energy efficiency programs. Those are our demand side management programs. I'm sure you've heard of our Conserve and Save rebate program, which we'll show a little bit later in the presentation. We continue with those offerings, but we also implement, and we've already started implementing demand response programs. We've just launched our smart thermostat program. We will be coming soon, hopefully at the end of this year into the beginning of next year. We're going to be looking at an EV direct load program. And then as a part of our AMI infrastructure plan that we're implementing here in the next 3 years, we will be looking at AC switch, new AC switch technologies, which are devices on the central air conditioner that will cycle on and off during those peak alert days. So all of that leads towards this is also part of our infrastructure and helping that reduce those emissions. So
I have a question about
Sure.
quick
Ms.
question.
Dennis?
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry, yeah. So it kind of goes back to what I asked earlier with, so people who are struggling paycheck to paycheck, who are, not paying attention to the website, not paying attention to community ed pamphlets, how are you going to get this technology into every single home or the vast majority of the homes in Rochester so that they can benefit from these devices and programs?
Well, one thing we do is we do advertise the various tax incentives and benefits on our website with our programs. We also, through community education, I know Lauren just did a community ed class on that, where we've been talking about doing some more joint advertising in our RPU plugged in. We do advertising every month, or I shouldn't say that because it's every other month now. We do ads, specific ads based on the type of season, or, cooling ads during the summer season, smart thermostat program during the summer season. We'll start moving into our neighborhood energy challenge workshops where we share this information. So at various events and venues, we talk about these opportunities that are out there.
Yeah. No, and I think that's wonderful. And I brought my plugged in.
Yep.
So I definitely receive it. But honestly, before when I was back in the school district and work, I shouldn't say this too, honestly, but I didn't read it, when I moved here in 07 and, like, this is something that kind of, as many maybe junk mail people come, and I think it's great. So I'm not discrediting this wonderful magazine. I do read it thoroughly now, but like things like, we have these ordinance packets. Has there ever been a talk about collaboration with other departments to make sure that these, a lot of information gets into every home, into, people struggling with language barriers, economic barriers, because I feel like, maybe on a bill, RPU bill or something, because I feel that a lot of people are missing. I know I've missed in the past, rebates and things, just because people are really, struggling and trying to make ends meet and not always having the opportunity to research, look on websites and read thoroughly all their mail.
Ms.
Um,
Steinhaus?
I-
Or,
I'm so
would
sorry.
you like to go, Ms. Hanson?
I'm sorry.
Would you like to speak? Otherwise, Ms. Steinhauser is ready to go.
I was just going to respond back in terms of, we have sent out we have sent out postcards in 3 different languages. We work with Language Line, so that we're making strides towards helping to be more inclusive to those customers that are, their first language is not English. And we are working with looking at converting our bill into Spanish. That will be the first one that we do. And then we'll look at some other languages down the line. They just take some time in terms of doing that, but that is in our roadmap. We will be doing those things,
Yeah.
those types of things. So
And I'm not keep wanting to elaborate, but I feel like there's so many barriers on so many, there's obviously what I talked about, cultural language, but, people who aren't techie or who have neurodivergencies or who come from other countries or whatever the situation may be, where they don't even know, rebates. I mean, rebates are kind of confusing too. I filled them out and I get them returned because I didn't have the right, like, I don't know, something on my receipt. So I feel like there's a lot of these, things. And so I don't know, I guess what my thoughts are is in the future, with so many wonderful projects and departments in our city to somehow get a unified communication stream. And I think you're doing a wonderful job. Like I said, I attend a lot of community ed classes and I read my things. But so many people I know, from walks of life who can't or don't, or, just there's so many reasons. So these programs are phenomenal, could help the environment and really, really help people in Rochester save money. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a very great point, and it's something that we're looking into, and there will be a lot in the remainder of this presentation that's going to address many of the things that you touched on. So our plans to work with departments, the funding we're receiving that we're using to set up an entire education campaign on these efforts, partnering with RPU on that, targeting workshops and events with community groups that can connect us to those communities that might be in more need, as well as to help offer those and participate in the development of them. So I think we are really going to talk a lot about that today. So this slide is just a quick recap of the 2023 work plan. and just highlighting that there was some pivoting this year because of a lot of the federal incentives that started coming out and being announced in some of those grant opportunities. We started to pursue a commercial benchmarking policy. You might remember back in March when we came forward to talk about that as an initiative for this year. We also had a very progressive state legislature, and that a commercial benchmarking policy was passed and included for that. So not something that we needed to continue to pursue at this point. We'll be going with the state policy and helping to set up our current voluntary program participants, make that transition to the state policy that will be starting in 2025. We've been working on this electrification or Electrify Rochester campaign. We've already started to put together some of the resources in terms of the incentive class that I teach through community education. We just joined the Electrify Rochester Expo that happened at the end of August. Both the city and RPU were there to talk about our programs and incentives and pathways for homeowners to electrify their house. And then working through a scope of work, which we'll get into later here, to further build out those educational campaign efforts, as well as some local training opportunities for contractors in Rochester to build out the workforce to answer that influx that we hope to see with electrification of homes and buildings. We had started a fleet assessment and are reevaluating that for 2024 here, bringing in fleet managers and finance to kind of dig deeper into, we had done some fleet studies and life cycle cost analysis, but kind of bringing that together with our actual budget and financing for the fleet now to really map out a transition plan for that and update those fleet studies. Every year we do our annual data collection and certifications with our Green Steps Cities program. Regional indicators, we're working through that update right now. Just transportation and some of that data doesn't arrive until later in the summer. And then Lead for Cities has been an ongoing progress as well. Again, Rochester was the first LEED Gold certified city in Minnesota. There's a new version of that out that we've been working through with the help of some of our city interns. And that again is just really connecting those different planning processes between departments in the city as a whole. Where can we implement sustainability throughout that? We kicked off our Sustainability and Resiliency Commission, so working throughout this year to set up and bring forward that charter, an ordinance to update that, preparing the first meetings, interviewing new commission members. We have 3 energy commissioners that rolled over and 6 new commission members. So we had our first meeting in August and our last one just last week here. It's a really great group of people. I'm excited to work with them. A lot of passionate individuals and really good background that's represented there. We completed a community EV infrastructure plan. That was something that we had highlighted in addition to an electrification education campaign because of those priority areas for emissions reductions. That helped set us up to apply for the Federal Department of Transportation Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant that was announced earlier this year. So having those plans in place really put us in a more viable position when these grant opportunities come out. We can always point back to our sustainability and resiliency plan, active transportation plans, wherever those connections are made to show that we are ready for implementation dollars. And then we had received funding from the MPCA in coordination with Public Works Comprehensive Surface Water Management Plan to do a resilience hub process and worked with some community members on opportunities for that and what it could look like in Rochester and continuing active transportation efforts. And we'll kind of get into some more examples of those in future slides here. So looking at partnerships and capacity building, a lot has been happening internally across departments, really in the support and the resources that are provided. For sure, in this last year, I've seen an increase in departments reaching out, looking for resources that can support the grants or the projects that they're looking to do. A lot of interest in electric vehicles this year. Cindy had mentioned the assistance on the community forestry grant that we applied for. I just had a meeting earlier today to talk about bus charging and electric buses and things we might think about as we look to purchase more buses and chargers for the Link Rapid Transit line. So really my role has been sharing these IRA incentives with those departments and helping to incorporate the sustainability and equity components within these grant applications, tying them to these plans that we've processed to make them stronger as we're submitting them. Participating in some capital improvement project planning processes, our park and ride on 75th Street, getting electric conduit included in there so that electric charging can be added to that later on if needed. Already had some initial meetings with community development in Olmsted County on the home rehabilitation loan program and connecting them with resources for homeowners for those IRA incentives. Working on equitable development, so moving forward into 2024, how are we working internally across departments to understand the timeline and processes and success resources basically that could create a toolkit to better help our women and minority owned businesses pitch for these projects that the city and DMC may be offering. A lot of work on the district energy system, a lot of communication and interest around that. We've had several cities reaching out, wanting to understand the process we took and how we're funding this project. And so looking forward, ways that we can create guides or resources that can help other people replicate this project as well. A lot in the active transportation space, and then ongoing connection with our legislative analysts as well to talk about priorities, supporting those bonding requests, again, making those connections to sustainability and equity in terms of how those holistically support our community. This is just a list of some of the grants this year that I've assisted on or applied for. We received the statewide health improvement partnership grant. We received the urban community forestry program grant, $1 million for that. We'll be submitting one for the U.S. Conference of Mayors here. And then we just found out about an environmental education grant that was announced that we'll be going for as well to help supplement these education campaign efforts that we're trying to put up so that the energy efficiency conservation block grant funding we received can go more directly towards project implementation for homeowners. So still looking for ways that we continue to build and support these programs that we have in place. And then there is participation on statewide groups as well. With that statewide benchmarking policy that was passed, cities that had either passed or were pursuing or had voluntary benchmarking programs of their own were invited to share insight on their processes to help the state set up their benchmarking policy and what that will look like. We participated in a call with the Department of Commerce on their Solar for All application. You know, they're really encouraging the state to apply for that and then wanting to understand from the city's perspective how they can trickle down those dollars and what existing programs are in place within the cities that could tap into those larger applications. We've also sat in on planning meetings for the state's Department of Transportation EV infrastructure plan. So helping to inform for Rochester and our region where we would like to see EV infrastructure in place, who are maybe the partners or business owners we know of locally that they can reach out to as they start to build out that plan for the state.
Mayor Norton.
Yeah, I just want to supplement that statewide collaboration, and Lauren may not even be aware of this because it goes through another department, again, as we've talked about earlier, but Matt C. and I both serve on the Vehicle Miles Traveled State Committee and attend the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Task Force as well for the state of Minnesota. So Rochester is at the table on those discussions as well.
Ms. Dennis.
Okay, thank you. Just want to chime in. I think this is exactly the problem we're facing. One of the big problems is the breakup of communication. Like the mayor just mentioned, that you might not be aware of these programs. I know a lot of people go to conferences and other people aren't shared those kind of information. So has there been talk about how we can streamline just resources? Like if you're not aware of something that the mayor and other
Ms. Dennis.
are, I feel that
Slide is exactly that. So I'm looking forward to hearing. Can you pause on your question and let Ms. Jensen speak to it?
okay, because I know that I am often in the dark when people go on conferences. I don't hear back from all the wonderful things. So I want to see how communication is being spread. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We do share internally via email opportunities as they arrive as well, but do have these internal partnerships that we work through too. The Energy Integration Committee is one that's with external partners, so city, county, Mayo, RPU, our utility partners there, Minnesota Energy Resources, and now UMR, because they're interested in doing a climate action plan for their Rochester campus, is a bi-monthly meeting for all of us to connect and share what we're doing across each of our organizations, share best practices, talk about opportunities to collaborate. So this is where we share updates on the district energy system, where we might talk about our electric vehicle opportunities. The county did their own kind of climate sustainability plan and really used some input from our city one. So just a way that we can collaborate with the major partners in town here as well on some of these initiatives to forward them together. We have the facilities impact team that Scott has put together that's internal across departments. Again, starting to kind of hone in on some of those sustainability components and making sure that we're uniform in what we're doing across our facilities and departments. Talking about policies internally that we could look at for EV charging, for building temperature, things like that, way that they can share what they're learning through energy efficiency with other buildings and facilities that the city oversees. Externally, we also have a monthly alternative transportation meeting with partners to talk about that in coordination with Public Works, our Parks Department, the library, community groups, and then just those ongoing department-specific initiatives as departments reach out to me with questions or looking for specific resources that might support a project, a program, or a grant that they're pursuing. Moving forward into 2024, we'll kind of talk about this in our last slide at the end here too, but setting up an internal resource team that focuses on finance, equity, sustainability to start to develop those resources that would further build capacity for departments and their individual employees so that it doesn't have to be me sitting on every, grant or project call or sharing these resources, but that departments and employees know where to go to get and access those and what they should be thinking of in terms of sustainability, economics, or any of those kind of aspects, equity included with the projects that they're putting together. Education, this is just kind of what we've been doing to date. We have our other slides here that will go into what's planned for the future here, but in coordination with DMC, we offer a monthly sustainability series. This is virtual once a month. We bring in a variety of different speakers to talk about a variety of topics to just help build sustainability education for community members and groups. We teach several enrichment courses through Northrop Community Education. Those are all sponsored by DMC and our EarthFest nonprofit in town so that any class under that sustainability category is free for residents to attend. Kevin previously taught one on home electrification. I teach one on just generally living sustainably, and now this year on IRA incentives as well as local rebates. So that does cover RPU and Minnesota Energy Resources rebates that they offer as well. I taught that class for the first time in February. The next one is this Wednesday, and we are already at double the registration that we saw in February for that class. And then RPU offers their solar classes and neighborhood energy challenge for energy audits as well. We have the annual EarthFest Expo that different folks, including myself, sit on that kind of planning group and work with other departments and community partners to offer education throughout the month of April. We had highlighted that back in March when we came and shared with you all. So again, kind of pushing out education through that. The Energy Commission has participated in that, and this last year shared about these electrification incentives. We just had the Electrify Rochester Expo, and then as I've mentioned, several community group presentations as they reach out and are interested in what Rochester is doing in terms of sustainability. I should mention too, we just recorded these online classes through Adult Enrichment so that they can upload those and they'll now be available to access online anytime so that you don't have to wait for the spring or the fall to attend that course. So we worked with a local videographer to put those together in kind of like a presentation style for online access. So excited that we'll be able to offer those out and share those at any time for residents.
That's really exciting. Do you want to go through your planned work and then Councilmember Dennis, you can hold your question till after
That
that?
actually was about that was my question about accessibility for the classes who can't, people can't attend. So where are they going to be posted, these courses that you have taught or through community ed that?
They'll be on YouTube
Online.
through Community Ed once they're uploaded, and then we'll link them on our pages as well so that there's multiple places people can access them.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep. So now kind of moving into the Inflation Reduction Act, which really is kind of a lot of our work that we've been doing this year and what we're trying to set ourselves up for next year. This is really just a slide to highlight what this is, the investment that it is for America, what it means for households, and the fact that it's available over the next 10 years. So depending on income levels, there's a variety of upfront discounts, tax rebates that are available for anyone, and it builds out rooftop solar, battery storage, and even geothermal systems for homeowners. So that image to the side is an example of a handout we've created that is now going to be a pop-up banner that we can bring and use for these events that we've been participating in. We've really been pushing out the existing resources that are out there with residents while we work to develop our own for this education campaign. Sharing that savings calculator with teammates and community development. We've already used that to build out a couple of homes through that home rehabilitation program and what they might be available for. So just sharing what's out there now while we put together what we can for our own. Really, I also want to drive home that tax credits are available now, but those upfront discounts will be determined by the Department of Commerce and the programs that they're setting up, and those are not ready yet. So that is really why we are spending the time to put this together and develop these resources so that when the Department of Commerce does announce those programs and they are open and available for those low income homeowners, that we are ready to go with the education and the programs that we'll be offering to support that. So right now, the only thing that is open is the tax credits, and we're really just waiting on the states to get those programs set up at the state level for those upfront discounts and how those will be offered. This is really our plans internally across city departments for how we can spread and share this information from the IRA through these educational resources that we'll be developing. I've already mentioned the home rehabilitation loan programs, but also working with the monthly landlord association meetings and our rental inspectors to share resources. We have over 27,000 rental units that were looked at in 2023, which is about 6,800 rental licenses this year that our team connected with. That's 6,800 people that we can share these IRA incentives with and use those existing channels. Additionally, with community development, the building permits and opportunities and the existing processes, there's already systems that builders and developers have to work through. And so pushing these resources out as they're going through those processes. Again, we had just over 1,700 residential inspections this year, 957 residential permits and 248 commercial permits. So setting up all of this education and these resources is very important for us to then use these existing streams to get that out there further in the community. You know, we have some funding with the Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant funding to support projects, but so much of this will be continuing that effort outside of that so that people can continue to take advantage of these existing programs and resources that are out there. And then working with Rochester Public Utilities to collaborate on the education opportunities that we're offering. We're looking at a potential Department of Energy fellow that could support this work, and then coordinating with area contractors and the existing partnerships that they already have with the area contractors to offer these incentives as well and these educational opportunities. And then this just focuses on external community partnerships. So we've had some meetings with Rochester Area Foundation regarding their First Homes program. Again, they're already buying homes and rehabbing them. How can we ensure that these are being taken advantage of at the beginning of that process and sharing these opportunities with them? Partnering with Rochester area builders for some of these trainings that I'll mention later on here in these next couple of slides. But again, the education and outreach through the existing avenues like the home show or the monthly meetings that they host. Working with WDI and the city with the Department of Labor funds that we received to support the development of green jobs and developing that workforce locally. Again, to connect in with these contractor trainings we're developing, and then our neighbors and other community organizations that we regularly partner with to reach some of those residential groups that we might not see otherwise, to provide those education opportunities. And work with some of those low income or minority neighborhoods that we could tap into through those groups. So going into kind of the initiatives and opportunities for 2024 then, and really now through the end of this year as well, the city will be receiving Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant funding. We talked about this back in March as well, but what we plan to use this for and the coordination that I just mentioned on the last slide with some of our other departments. But that biggest opportunity we had from that pie chart earlier in the presentation is converting our homes to electric for heating and cooling. And so that's really what this funding is going to support. There will be about 50,000 of it that we'll keep to spend on municipal projects, and we've connected with our facilities teammates on potential projects that they could use that to help fund. Anything from LED lighting replacement, networking our controls, revamping fixtures, electrification of our mechanical systems. So essentially just help fund some of those facility projects that we're looking at. And then the bulk of it working with our McKnight grant funding to further build out what we're able to do with these funds we're receiving, and then collaborating with RPU on some of these educational pieces. So this is where we get more into the workshops and events, so that it's not only going to be directed towards residents, but contractors, developers, lenders. We want to hit all sides of the equation. If we're educating residents on these incentives and the questions they should be asking, we also want contractors to be knowledgeable, up to date on the technologies, and available to answer those questions about the IRA and the incentives and rebates that are available for that as well. Putting together case studies, obviously, we've had a lot of interest in district energy, but making sure that there's case studies for residential projects as well, so that people can understand the benefit and the impact that they can have. Several handouts will be created, again, to support the education of this work that we can share with these different groups that we might be interacting with, whether it be rental and landlords or developers through community education, as well as residents and contractors. And then the social media and a website that we would put together where all of this could be housed, that people would be able to access. We're also working on a workforce training. Again, I mentioned that would be in coordination, again, with community development and our rental inspectors and building inspectors. It would be in collaboration with Workforce Development Initiative, building a heat pump and an air source heat pump, hot water heater, and air source heat pump contractor training, so that we can build out a network in Rochester of contractors that people can tap into, and not just specific to the technologies, but incorporating the IRA pieces to it. That is not something that has been done yet. And so labeling Rochester as kind of a leader in that space for developing those trainings that could then be replicated elsewhere in the state. It will also include an energy advisor service, so that residents have a phone number they can call with questions about any of this, what pathway they would take to electrify their home, where they would access those resources, what's the right tax credit, where do I find that, how do I fill it out? That would provide that service, because again, it's not something that I would have the capacity to answer those amount of phone calls for. And we have people that are already very, very knowledgeable on these. So providing that in coordination with all of the educational resources. And then, as I mentioned, half of that remaining funding would go towards actually doing electrification projects for low income or BIPOC communities. So if the IRA does those upfront discounts and tax credits don't get them to zero, we would use this funding to help close that gap for those homeowners. This is just further breaking out all of those education initiatives and the timeline with this. So we are working on finalizing the scope of work that would set up everything that was just outlined on that previous slide. We just kicked off last month. The Department of Energy has blueprint cohort. So when we submit our energy efficiency conservation block grant application, they're really asking cities to pick a topic and then adhere to the blueprint in filling out the application. So just started that process. And so that's a cohort that I'll be participating in the next couple of months to make sure that we're setting up our application that's due at the end of January, following those blueprints that the Department of Energy would like to see. Again, we don't submit this application until end of this year. It's due January 31st, 2024. We can submit it sooner. Obviously wouldn't submit it till after we finish this cohort that will help develop the actual application and the blueprint for it. So again, getting that funding before we can fully launch this education campaign, and still waiting on the Department of Commerce to launch some of those things as well. So hopefully by the end of this year, all of that will be in place, and that sets us up to launch all of this in 2024. I mentioned we've already started to put together and do things that we can to fill in the gaps as we wait for some of this. So still getting out there and providing that education as we're able to. Just touching really quickly here again that we're partnering with RPU to not only talk about the federal incentives, but the local incentives that are available to people, and the ability to stack all of these on top of each other. You can do these projects year over year, plan them out so that you're taking advantage of this funding each year, depending on your financial needs and where you sit with that. They have commercial rebates as well as residential rebate programs. So really working with them as well, how can we maybe further fine tune some of these, or connect them more to these electrification efforts as we move forward with what we're incentivizing as a community. And then this other scope of work on the training, again, finalizing that, looking to develop these over the next couple of months, once that's signed off on. And then hosting trainings twice next year for each of those, one in the spring and one in the fall. We would then have a vetted contractor list for Rochester residents to reach out to. So working on some of those preliminary conversations with community partners that would be a part of setting this up. But again, really trying to educate all sides of the equation here with these resources and incentives that are out there. The other big thing is electric vehicle adoption. That's the second highest area of opportunity for us to reduce emissions. I mentioned we had applied for a grant in June. We're still waiting to hear back about that one, but it was $4.5 million to install 82 level 2 and 6 fast chargers throughout the community. This is in community or city-owned parking ramps, parking lots, parking parks within the community. We partnered with the county to offer some county sites outside of Rochester, and then RCTC to include some at their park and ride, as well as the county's park and ride, so that we can start to build out this infrastructure network to support this adoption and this increase of electric vehicles that we're seeing. And then coordinating with city departments as necessary, should we receive that grant funding, to make sure that we have the resources and the grid supply and all of that to support the installation of these. RPU also just launched their EV Choice rebate program for electric vehicles. So that's brand new, something that we're pushing out and sharing. Again, as Patty talked about, managing that demand as we're pushing for the electrification of all these things that will affect the demand. And so what are the programs that they can set up to help manage that, and keep that load in control with as these electrification things start to increase. This is just a map to show with that grant that we applied for where those different chargers were located, a lot in the downtown core, as there's more emphasis on our Justice 40 census tracts, and those kind of overlap with our downtown core area and just where we have existing facilities that are city owned that we can tap into. This, like our district energy system, should we receive this funding, is really a way for the city to show our commitment and investment in these projects and help encourage the community to follow that implementation and adoption of these things as well. And then looking forward to 2024, again, continuing with this electrification campaign, getting it actually launched and starting to host those workshops, create those educational documents, working with those groups to attend things that they might already be putting on, so that we can get as many things out there as possible. Specifically working with the groups that are already doing home projects, so that we can identify qualifying homes and use that funding to support those projects. Working on that updated fleet study, as I mentioned earlier on, so that we have a better transition plan based on the funds that we have available. Quantifying sustainability organization-wide, so outlining the investments that we receive across departments that align with and incorporate sustainability, to show how that is being incorporated in those different areas. And then that departmental support and kind of that internal team that can provide the resources and the tools to help broadly integrate sustainability across the city and our different departments, to build that capacity within each department, and not just administration or sustainability alone. So with that, I will open it up for any additional questions, and thank you all.
That was fantastic. Wow. Great work, and really good to see the opportunities to improve with some additional resources, and really thoughtful ways to use those resources that can inform other communities' work around the country. So great job.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions? Councilmember Keen?
Yeah, we hear extensively about the IRAs and all this sustainability investments that are out there. It's my experience that if we are ready to do something like we were with district energy, we can really take advantage of those things. If not, we have to come up with additional spending to do them. Do you have any examples where you're finding that, no, there are other ways to take advantage of this without having to do unplanned spending?
I mean, we are definitely evaluating all of these options that come in, because some do require matches that we don't have. That charging, actually, that Department of Transportation, the federal charging one that we applied for, required a 20% match. But if you partner with an external entity, they can cover that instead of the city. So we worked with ChargePoint, who is the the existing EV chargers that we have in our city ramps are charge point chargers. And so they worked with us on that grant application. So they would essentially provide that 20% match for us, and then they would operate those chargers. So there's different things that we look at. Again, it doesn't make sense to, just because there's 10 grants out there, to apply for all 10 of them. Really, where are the plans that we have in place that are ready for implementation, that set us up for the, the grants or whatever resources it may be that match those?
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm finding too. Something like District Energy, where the timing of that really worked out well for the city of Rochester, that we were able to leverage the money we were going to spend to do a lot more. But there's other places where we're not able to take advantage of them because we don't have the money set aside or don't have projects ready.
That's why I like the focus on education and training, because it really, it isn't building new things. It's really getting the word out about all these great opportunities that are already accessible or will be accessible through the federal or state government or city.
Okay.
Yeah, using our funding for the the Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant to set up that education and the existing channels. I mean, that's why we spent so much time building out what are our departments already doing, who are the groups they're already interacting with, and how can we funnel this education and spend the money in the education, because that will go so much farther once it gets out to all of those groups and reaches those different avenues.
Ms. Elms?
Yeah, I just think it's a really good point made by Lauren, and the question that we also integrate this across the entire city. So we're trying to integrate these things. So it's not some new thing that someone does, but it's part of what they maybe are already working on, including that it's integrated in all three of the strategic priorities in the city. So we're balancing those foundational principles of environmental stewardship and fiscal sustainability. So looking at those things. So within the area of affordable living, there's a component of our action plan that talks about the value of of not just affordable living, but how can we make affordable living happen through some of those environmental plans and access and availability to reduce costs for the energy and for how folks, what people are living in the economic vibrancy and growth management space. A lot of that is related to the not just economic viability, but also how can we build in some sustainable systems so that we aren't overgrowing our systems in a way that will further burden the environmental systems that are also necessary to think about, and also in those quality services spaces. So I just think of the 311 customer service as well as RPU gets lots of phone calls every single day, being able to have some of that education integrated there. So if somebody's on a call and the question comes up, they're able to provide that information on a call that otherwise maybe someone really wasn't calling for that question, but they're able to get the information because we're organizing in a way that is considerate of our priorities across the city, not just in pockets of each department, so that we're able to better get to folks and think about this in a way that is integrated throughout the different things that we have to provide as a city that are expectations from a public health, safety, and welfare perspective, but also can be looked at from that lens of environmental stewardship, from electrification to tree canopy to water health, those kinds of things.
Really well said. Ms. Steinhauser, then Councilmember Dennis.
Yes, I just wanted to build off of that. I think what's really important for you, some of the takeaways for today, besides all the excellent information that Lauren presented, is Administrator Zelm said, it's integrated approach. It's also about leveraging, right? We often talk about, actually, Aaron used to say this to me quite often, say no to the good to say yes to the best, right? And I think that really applies here, right? Like there's a plethora of opportunities out there, but they're only opportunities if you are in alignment. And by alignment, I mean, we have been spending a lot of time really building what I call the 3 Ps, people, planning, and partnering, right? Creating that strong foundation so that when opportunities do come, we can say this has alignment with our plan. We have partners at the table. Maybe it's not something that we lead on, but rather we support. And so this group over here should support and we do what we can to help because it advances in the work that we're doing. And so really, you do need to say no to good so you can say yes to the best, so that it sets you up for future success. There's nothing worse than applying for too many things, not being able to implement them well, and having a project fail fall under the weight of trying to roll it out as opposed to being very strategic about what we decide to go after and really making an impact, checking it and checking that box off and then moving on to the next transformational work that we're doing, because that's what we're really talking about here.
That makes total sense to me. Thank you for that. Councilmember Dennis and then Councilmember Kirkpatrick.
Right. Well, thank you so much. So yeah, I've been looking at funding. Obviously, we want to be very good stewards of taxpayers' property tax. We want to not raise that any more than we possibly are forced to. But looking at the LGA and doing some research, looking at some of the state data, it looks like this raise a million to, I mean, we don't have as much as Duluth and St. Cloud and other places, but the $5 million is going to be a permanent kind of increase. That increase for the LGA can be used for salaries and operational budgets. So like adding a new person to your department, for instance, and I know we're looking at capital improvements and things like that, but this looks like it's going to be an ongoing funding source. It does not tap into property tax. And so I think looking at maybe more help in your department that not just helps futures like 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, 500 years from now, what you're doing is, I think, should be a priority of our city. I looked at our organizational chart. Obviously, it said foundation principles. We have environmental stewardship, strategic priorities is affordable living. This kind of grant information, like this kind of things that we can bring to the residents could really help them stay in their homes. You know, if we can decrease their utility bills, it's a win. There's a lot of wins, but I mean, so I just want to say, you know, like, what would you do with an extra position? Someone who, if you could have, let's say, use the LGA, which would not impact property tax, what would you do with a position that maybe could focus on these limited government funds, grants, federal IRAs?
We'll let Ms. Zelms
Can I just
wrap up.
start with indicating what has been presented to the council since April is that LGA is a 2-year commitment from the state. So the state passes a 2-year budget. The formula actually hasn't changed. So based on the formula and past experience, we would expect that to continue to decline after that 2-year budget. That doesn't mean that's something that we wouldn't prioritize or the council might not prioritize in their legislative priorities. Right now, it is dedicated towards capital improvements. Particularly, there's a replacement of a roof at the existing recreation center, a roof that wasn't upgraded when the expansion happened. So there would be implications to that, but it's of course an ongoing conversation. There's, you know, many years in the future or months in the future, if there was something that the council wanted to prioritize, but within the budget that is before you today, that structurally does rely on that one-time increase in the local government aid within the capital improvement budget, because those are not continuing costs like a staff person. But Lauren or Cindy might be able to share what they would prioritize. I would just also point out that a lot of the communication that was referenced happens across our communications teammates, which we're working more and more to integrate and centralize so that they're not just working on any one type of work, but they're also supportive of their teammates in a variety of different kinds of initiatives that we undertake where they have maybe their expertise and skill in communications and working together with Lauren or others who may have some specific work that needs to get out across the community. But just for clarity's sake on the local government aid conversation, it's integrated within your existing budget, and there would be increases to your property tax if you weren't relying on that in the current way, or you'd need to make other reductions.
Just to put numbers
Sure.
to the LGA, just so you all have the information.
Go ahead, Mr.
for
Parrish.
now and into the- Sorry. So in 24, we're projected to get just over $5 million. We budgeted 3.9 million into the operating budget already. So that funds all the things, the general fund budget funds that you all know about. Then it's that differential of just over $1 million that was put to capital and viewed as more one time, not necessarily something we're gonna be able to count on in the long view.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Steinhauser, then Ms. Jensen, would you like to respond as well? Okay, go ahead.
Sure. So I just, thank you, just specific to Councilmember Dennis's question about what we do with an additional person. I mean, obviously, we have not had that conversation because there are many needs across the organization. And so we would want to understand what's the council in providing funding for an additional person, was there an intent and a priority specifically in mind? But what I do know in this work lives beyond an individual, lives beyond all of us. So what we would really want to prioritize, in my opinion, is how do we build capacity and support across the organization? As Administrator Zelm said, this is about making sure that the culture of our organization thinks about sustainability in an integrated approach across all the departments, across all of our projects. We've made some really great headway in that way. And so I would anticipate that work would be in the capacity building space, much like other position requests have been presented to you, whether it's in equity, whether it's been in public safety or public works or the many other departments.
Thank you for that. Ms. Jensen?
Yeah, I would mirror a lot of what Cindy said as well, but I don't think I'd be the only person from any department or group to stand up here and say I couldn't use another person for capacity and effort and things like that. But I mean, that's really why we're focusing so much in this next year of how in my role can I assist and support those other departments with the projects that they're doing? If that funding is going to capital improvement projects, what are we including in those projects that emphasize that triple bottom line of sustainability? What are the resources that we're putting together for our city teammates and other departments so that they have those in front of them to think about and implement that triple bottom line in the programs or policies or projects or whatever it is that they're putting together? Really focusing these efforts in the next year of what are the existing internal partnerships within departments and external with community partners, and how can my role create those resources or toolkits or guidance that broadly starts to support this more across the community. I think the first few years of my role here was a lot of planning. We did our sustainability and resiliency plan. We did our greenhouse gas emissions impact reduction analysis, really setting ourselves up for where do we go from here, and now helping other departments to understand and implement that in the work that they're doing.
Thank you for that.
Just want to follow up. Yeah, so I think that's wonderful. When you look at our priorities, and of course this falls right under what we could do to really help citizens on a very fundamental level, to keep them in their homes, to help them paycheck to paycheck, is I think where we should be focusing our priorities. And when you want to look at someone's priority, you want to look at any of your priorities, you look at what you pay attention to and you look at your checkbook ledger, where you spend your money. You spend your money at a certain place, that's your priorities. And I think that we should really be focusing more on sustainability because, like we said, we just have one planet. And so what I found out about or looked into the LGA, it went down in, I believe, 2003, but we have someone currently on the tax committee that's fighting to raise that formula. And it is what I have researched is it's projected to stay and if not go up, not go back down. So I think that would be a good investment, and then use other forms of grants and such for these capital projects and focus the LGA, which of course does not impact property tax, on operational, such as maybe an additional person, such as the Metro has and other places that really take advantage of these federal programs. The IRA, this stuff is not going to be lasting, not going to be around forever. These programs, we want to harness, take advantage of this money right now. And so I think the partnership that you have been talking about, I'm not downplaying anything. I think it's wonderful, all of this. Talking with the county, I think like there's a county commissioner who goes every single year, every single door in his district. I mean, maybe we could get every county commissioner, every council member to go, when they go door to door to all of their residents in their community, to drop off, information, not just use more, like think outside the box, and how can we really get information in the hands of people who really need it. I mean, yes, if you make, $100,000 and you have time on your hands to research, that's great. Yes, definitely. I want all of those residents to also, benefit and to have environmental, impact. But the people who I think that really have a hard time getting this vital information that can change their life with decreasing their cost of living is so, and I'm using that, some people prioritize the environment, which I do and a lot of people do, but regardless if you prioritize the environment, your checkbook, people's, food on their table, their future, their kids, their livelihoods can be dramatically improved. The payback of this, having an extra position who focuses, who brings back that federal money, could really enrich the lives of people in Rochester. So I really think we should look at that with our budget, try to use LGA more efficiently and doing it in ways that would benefit everyday citizens here in Rochester. So, thank Thank you.
Councilmember Dennis, thanks for your passion. You bring up a few really good points and always interesting to hear the feedback. I just think you are doing an exceptional job in the position with the resources you have. I think this model that you are really leaning into the partnerships across the organization and across the community is really promising because it's not one person. Obviously, we have to change our mental models and change the way we're looking at the work across our organization and partners in order to make a real effort to get to our goals long term. So thank you for everything you do. And if there are, I assume if there is a need for increased staffing, that that's something you would be working with our leadership to explore. So we have a sense of what that could even look like, but just know that you are very much appreciated in all you do.
Thank you.
All right, well, we will wrap up and turn it over. Do you have a Yes, Councilmember Kirkpatrick.
I wanted to go after Cindy Steinhauser spoke about.
I don't know what it is. I have you written down right here.
I know, it's okay, it's all right,
Okay,
it's
go
okay, I hold no grudges. I almost don't remember what I wanted to mention. The thing that's coming first and foremost to me is the fact that you had our neighbors as contact. So thank you very much for utilizing that resource. It really reaches a lot of people. It's integral to our neighborhood associations that we have that are just such varied, wonderful units of people and culture and economic diversity. So thank you for putting them down. I think it's a great way to reach folks. I think what I was going to comment on, Ms. Steinhauser, was true appreciation for the amount of planning and looking and reading and digging deep to understand, what does this grant entail? What are the terms and conditions for this? Nope, that one won't work. What is this grant? What are the terms and conditions? Nope, that won't work. And you go through a plethora of these until you actually find one that you can land on. And then you begin the work of filling everything out to do it with those partners or anybody else that can come in. And it's so time consuming to weed through so many of those things. So thank you very much for doing that due diligence. But on that note, the USDA Agri, Sustainable Agriculture and Urban Agriculture, has a lot of IRA grants going. So when I hear about a new roof being put on a building, I'm wondering, is it going to have solar on it to tie into this electrification? Or could we possibly be growing food on it?
I would
So
just
that's
say
it.
solar is difficult on a municipally owned roof until 2030. I would love to explore a green roof if that's an opportunity or something to look into. We just, have to see how well we're set up for that and if it makes sense. And I know Scott is interested in those things as well. He had kind of started to look into a green roof for the library when that one needed to be redone. So it definitely things that we're thinking about and can look further into as those projects come about and those grant resources match those projects that are happening.
Awesome. Thank you for keeping your eye out for those because I am like raring to go on that stuff. Thanks.
Go ahead, Ms. Steinhauser.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Council President Carlson. Something that Councilmember Kirkpatrick said made me think of what's different now from 2018 when we really started putting these plans together and started going after these funding. And this just anecdotally, I've been thinking about this with every one of these grant applications that we go after. Inevitably, it requires a letter of support. And in the early years of pursuing these grant funding, it was in the community with our partners, was helping them understand. And sometimes it was a struggle to get even one letter of support, I'll be honest. And now like they get it. And that's that relationship building and that's alignment with plans, alignment with your policies that align so closely with, other community policies. Now getting those letters of support is a very smooth and integral part of this work. And so, a thank you to our partners who have come to the table with this and have been willing to share their voice in as we pursue these funding opportunities. So that just anecdotally is data that qualitative data that I think is important to share.
Yeah, and it takes so much time to build out those networks to find those agencies, those organizations that are able to partner with you on a one-time or even a continuing basis. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate it.
Could I add
Sure, go ahead.
something? Just to that point, I mean, that is really one of the more enjoyable parts about this is getting to work with the community partners. I mean, for a lot of them, they're the one that they have the lived experience. They're doing it day to day. we can bring that support and influence to develop a grant application, but really the ideation and what fits the best in terms of the programming or whatever we want to put together. The urban forestry grant had letters of support from Pamoja Women and ACLA so that we can connect with those groups for the workforce development opportunities and the urban forestry stewardship training that we're looking at. We're working on an active transportation one with, even the electric vehicle one had support letters from Mayo Clinic for that electric vehicle infrastructure plan and grant. And so it is really fun to work with those community groups and knowing what we have as departments that we can bring to the table and what they have based on their lived experience as community members and bringing that together to create these.
Yeah, very cool. Councilmember Palmer?
Well, I'd be amiss not to talk about LGA. Rochester gets almost $6 million this year. Duluth gets a raise from last year to this year for $8 million. That's their raise. They get $38 million. It's part of the problem with LGA is the criteria for it. It's the number of jobs per capita, number of homes per prior to 1940, percentage of homes from 40 to 70. And LGA is used to keep our property taxes down. Ms. Dennis, you said that you didn't even read the RPU newsletter prior to getting elected, and I think that's part of the problem. The city of Rochester and a lot of places put out a lot of stuff and people don't pay attention to it. And the more you put out, sometimes they don't. And when you're campaigning, when you throw that brochure on somebody's door, they look at it and throw it away. That's 99% of the people that I've dealt with. And I think that's part of our problem in Rochester and for the United States is people aren't paying attention. There's a lot of programs out there. And I've used RPU programs and I've used Minnesota natural gas programs. They're very easy to use. I'm just a carpenter. It's not that hard to figure out. But going back to LGA, we will probably end up going down to zero for LGA here in the near future. And there's zero hope that we're going to get anything bigger on LGA, even though we've tried for a long time. So.
All right, well, thank you for your time tonight or this afternoon and Ms. Elms' study session schedule before we wrap up.
Certainly, council members, Mayor Norton, we do have a couple of things coming up on October 2nd. We will have that overview of co-design, excuse me. We have 60 minutes scheduled for that. That was discussed at a prior council member. We also have some teammates coming with an update on some ideas for heritage preservation. Then going into the second meeting of October, you have your next council learning session that's focused on I believe, conflict. And then we have in the latter part of October, some updates from Superintendent Pickell and Olmsted County Administrator Heidi Welsh, as well as a quick update from our partners that are working together with us on an age-friendly walk audit report from Service Rochester. Look at that. Power came back on. We'll also be looking at some of the items in the unscheduled topics. As you can see, there's a fair amount of time starting to become available later in the year. And depending on how the conversation goes this afternoon, there may be some more time available. So I think that will be something that we will look at bringing back to you some more information and filling some of those gaps in with discussions about preparing for 2024, things of that nature with the city council. So just be looking for some updates on the study session calendar in the next couple of weeks.
Or if there are suggested areas that we need learning on for future decisions, it'd be nice to hear from my colleagues if we're missing something on our study session schedule. All right, well, we will wrap up and reconvene at 7 o'clock. Thank you so much.